Hey, welcome back to KP Ready Unpacked. If you have never joined us before, this is a great opportunity for you to hear from KP Ready himself about what has inspired his latest, most popular, most engaging LinkedIn post. My name is Jeff Eccles. I'm a senior advisor and head of marketing for KP Ready Company. And today I am joined by KP Reddy. He is the founder and CEO of Shadow Ventures and also the namesake, as you might have figured out, of KP Reddy Company. Hi, KP.
Hey, how's it going?
It is going really well. For those of you that are listening in right now, I really value this time every week because this is my time to sit down with KP and just ask him to unpack some of the things that he's posted on LinkedIn. So the first question is, are you following KP Reddy on LinkedIn? If not, the question is, why not? Um, he posts there 1 to 2 times a day, usually. A lot of those posts come from his experiences, his conversations, teaching, interactions with startup founders, with VCs, LPs, other investors. Um, and all of the posts are insightful. Some of them stir the pot a little bit. That's kind of fun, but that's a really great place for you to go and get some real world conversation around what's happening in terms of innovation for global assets that support humanity. And today is no different. KP and I will unpack one of his LinkedIn posts. Actually, this was a week ago you posted this. So we'll jump into that here in just a minute. Anything that you want to talk about before we dive into the post itself?
It's great to talk to you. We only talk this time every week. We don't talk in between. So this is the only time you get on my calendar.
Yeah, exactly.
Make the best of it.
Exactly. Yeah. The rumor that we were on the phone with each other 6 minutes ago is absolutely false.
Yes, untrue.
All right. Well, a week ago, as part of your Sunday Scaries series, and so you've got a couple of different series, LinkedIn article series that you have, and maybe you want to talk about that for a minute. But as part of your Sunday Scaries series last Sunday, so a week ago Sunday, you said you will always be a founder of your own startup. You may not always be the CEO. That is up to you. And so I know if you read the article that accompanies that post, you talk about the fact that not all founders grow into CEOs. So you talk to a lot of founders every week. Also as part of our incubator, also as for Shadow Ventures, obviously, in terms of scouting for investment, et cetera. What inspired you to write that specifically in your Sunday Scaries column?
Well, it's also board season. So I'm also having a ton of board meetings with all my portfolio companies. And so it's really tough. I think when you have founders that, the business is going slow, it's not taking off like a rocket ship. And they're just kind of pushing it along. That's one thing. One thing that I was taught, I had this mentor, this investor mentor of mine, and he said, just remember you're an investor. You're not an entrepreneur anymore, which means an entrepreneur wakes up and fixes all the problems on any given day. And an investor ignores all the problems and focuses on their winners. Like there's a law of diminishing returns of spending time with your problem portfolio companies. And so when, when I'm having nonstop board meetings, I think we've got 20 something portcos, and then I've got my personal investments. So it's a busy season, so to speak. I just started seeing this pattern. And I think when in many ways a founder can hold their company back because they lack the skills. Mm-hmm. And in many ways their startup's going to run them over, and they're just like hanging on. And there's this weird kind of cadence of, I think they talked about in the E-Myth, the book E-Myth, which is an old school business book. They talk about working on the business or working in the business. And so many founders don't have a choice. They're working in the business. But what I'd say is more so than working on the business, they need to be working on themselves. Mm. And so, you have to ask yourself with every funding round, with every quarter, am I still qualified to run this company? Am I
Yeah.
still the best CEO for this company? You'll always be a founder. Nobody will ever take founder title away from you, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be the CEO for the long term, or nor should you. And I think there's, back when I first started kind of personally investing in all, it was fairly common that if a tech startup took off, that the Sequoias of the world at Series A would replace the founders with the CEO.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was they didn't have the skills to take a company public. They didn't have the time. They couldn't be bothered with it. They didn't know how to scale organizations. And so that was kind of the common thing back in the day. And so I see it now where, one, there's so much executive talent, startup executive talent out there, because there's been a lot of companies out of business and there's been a lot of companies that have been successful. And I think a founder has to look at themselves and say, what skills do I need? If I look at the company hitting this next level, what skills do I need to go build? And they have to carve out time, either through peer groups, either through reading, like whatnot. This is also an area where I think having great service providers, like a lawyer, accountant, not to do the work. I mean, the default standard should be they do a good job. Like let's you pay them, they should do their job. But if you have a good relationship, they also become great teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Like my personal attorney's been with me for 30 years. He actually came from a big law firm, and then has become like he's kind of personal attorney to a half dozen of us now that are all entrepreneurs. I learned so much from him. He never like looked at a term sheet, marked it up, and sent it out. He'd be like, "Hey, come by the office. I'll show you how this works." And so I think that's one of those invaluable things and resources for learning. So I think you have to work on yourself. And you have to kind of think of it as like, when I'm successful, am I going to have the skills to know what to do with it when it takes off, and understand that you might get replaced. I mean, that's just the nature of the nature of business.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we can all understand maybe the emotions behind that, right? Oh, this is my baby, right? This is the thing that this is my brainchild, the thing that I created, the thing that I've built. But just like in kids, you have to let go at some point, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
in order for those kids to lead a healthy life. Um, and it's also not lost on me, especially in our ecosystem. When we run our incubator and even the portcos for Shadow Ventures, there are so many people, so many founders in that ecosystem that were civil engineers, that were architects, that were, there was something other than a CEO. There was something other than many of them, something other than a quote unquote tech person.
Mm-hmm.
But they had identified a problem and developed a solution for it. Makes them a great problem solver, perhaps,
Mm-hmm.
but doesn't necessarily mean, like, again, architecture school, you're a recovering civil engineer. I'm recovering on the architecture side. I still teach for practice in architecture school. There's not a school in the country that I know of in their architecture program that's teaching anyone how to be a CEO
No,
or a VP or anything.
because the
But
business for architecture is a terrible business. So
there's that. There's that.
if they
That's
gave
why you
them
should all be developing startups.
if they gave them business skills in architecture school, they would leave architecture.
And that's why many do.
No, I think when I was running, I used to run Georgia Tech's incubator ATDC about 10 years ago. It's like wild. It's been 10 years. But I printed out a job description for a CEO and I would keep it on my desk. And when founders would come to me and, they're, it's part advice, it's part therapy, right? Dealing with founders.
Yeah, yeah, yep.
And I would say, why do you think you're qualified to be CEO? Like, you should just take CEO off your business card. You're a founder.
Yeah.
You're not quite a CEO yet. And here's the job description for a CEO. tell me which one of these things are you an expert at? And they could check like very few of the boxes. And
Hmm.
what that means is, as your your business doesn't need all these skills yet. Your business doesn't need this job description yet. But let's assume you're going to be highly successful. It will need these skills.
Yeah.
So your choice is either you're going to go out and find someone with these skills, or you should be working like this. This job description is your roadmap for your own personal career development,
Yeah.
and take it seriously and carve out time every week because it can't happen. And I think one of the coolest things I think about our incubator and our community and all the stuff that we do is I've really stopped trying to give founders the answers.
Hmm.
I've really said, I've already given this one founder the answer. I'm going to introduce you to them. They can talk to you about it. And because from a scale perspective, I need to teach one or two founders a concept, and then they need to go to teach two or three. So the peer learning part, which we see tremendously in our incubator, right? It's just so
Hmm.
collaborative.
Yeah.
I'd like to see more of it with my portcos. I think they get a little insular sometimes. But I really think that's also a huge thing is you should have friends um, that are a little bit further along. I mean, I think even with the incubator, those are mostly pre-seed companies. You do a good job of bringing in the CEOs of my portco in that have, raised a seed round or a Series A round to kind of pay it back, right? To say like, here's what I encountered, and all the founders can ask a million questions. And I think never discount peer learning, especially in
Yeah.
startup world. I think it's funny. I have one founder that started on my kitchen table that's now a $10 billion company. And I had to tell him one time, I was like, dude, like I can't coach you anymore. Like
Yeah.
you have more skills around being a CEO, even though I've run two public companies, like your skills are way beyond mine.
Hmm.
Now I can only help you as a father and a husband and a human. Like
Well, that
I can help
turns
you
out
with
that's
that.
pretty important, though.
Right, because he's 30 something, right? I was like, hey, let me
Yeah.
help you about like life. Like I can be your coach around life,
Yeah.
but I need to maybe come to you and ask you advice on how to be a good CEO because clearly you're doing it.
Yeah. Well, there's that famous Jim Rohn quote where he said, "You become the average of the five people that you spend the most time with." And I think that's super applicable here.
Hmm.
Whether it's in terms of, for instance, the incubator, you're surrounded and it's collaborative, and you become the average, you have the average skill of everybody around you. But then when you're leveling up, right, you need to change those people
Hmm.
so that that average continues to go up and continues to raise you up. So that's I think that's really good advice.
Yeah. And so I think that I think it's so easy to get so myopic as a founder, like, oh, I got this fire, I got that fire. And 95% of startups fail, right? That's just math. Um, so what you're doing is maybe preparing for your next deal. Like, what's the worst thing that happens? You carve out, you know, 4 hours a week, 5 hours a week to work on yourself and work on these skills. And God forbid, go get a textbook on finance because maybe you're an architect and you don't know how finance works. And by the way, if you have questions about what books to read as a founder, ping me. I probably have them all, right? Um, and there's so many books out there. And if you're not going to commit, 4 to 6 hours a week to upskilling yourself, what's the worst case scenario? Right? The worst case scenario is your company goes out of business, you're to go do something else, and you'll know a lot more and be more skilled for your next thing. But you really got to focus on it. I think, and I get it, right? I mean, my wife says all the time, like, I thought you're like just an investor these days. I'm like, I'm never just in anything. Okay. Like, don't put a label on me. But, just wrote my book and there's so many stuff, I'm always working on stuff and I don't have to, but I'll tell you, it is the inertia of being a founder. I don't know how to take a vacation. I don't know how to take time. Like, it's just, it comes from that. And I think the growth part, I'm like a book or two a week. And even my kids are like, Dad, like, what is wrong with you? Like, like, why don't you relax? I don't understand people that read fiction. I'm like, well, how do you have time for fiction when you have to read 2 business books a week, or you got to reread books, right? Like that's one thing. You got to reread books. And so I think there has to be a commitment as a founder to your own personal growth, um, and staying accountable to. I've got a couple founders that I feel like all I'm doing is like kind of accountability coaching them
Sure. Yeah.
around like you said you wanted to learn, you said you wanted to
Mhm.
get better.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah.
Let's focus on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can't grow the thing. In this case, your startup. You can't grow the thing if you're not growing yourself.
Hmm.
That those have to work together. It's a necessity. Yeah. You mentioned your book, which I know is a slight tangent here, but I think we ought to bring it up anyway.
Dude, which
It's
one?
the well, yeah, okay. That's a fair question. That's a good question. So, uh, the new one, your third one, creating the intangible enterprise. As we're recording this, it hit bookshelves a little over a week ago.
Hmm.
It hit bookshelves on April 30th, 2024. So when you're listening to this in 2028, this book has been out like 4 years now. But creating the intangible enterprise is out. It's on bookshelves. It's available everywhere. What's that one about?
It really is my studies of last year, really meeting with CEOs of firms, and as AI was getting into the boardroom, into the C-suite, and really this like, hey, this we know this is going to be disruptive. I don't think anyone can question that. How do we prepare ourselves and our people to thrive in it? It's really easy to be doom and gloom. Oh my God, there's going to be so many jobs lost, et cetera. And I'm like, yes, there probably will be, right? There probably will be. But to those that are willing to, once again, back to the founder conversation, to grow and build new skills, they will do fantastic. I mean, I really think as a, with my founder hat on, one of the biggest industries to get disrupted by AI is going to be venture capital. Because if you don't need capital to go hire rooms full of programmers and marketing people and this and that, and you can leverage AI, why do you want to sell part of your company to me? You should keep it all. And so it's very top of mind around, and I think a lot of VCs won't admit this, right? You have to be
Mhm.
this is where the VCs, VC tourism, as we talk about it, the tourists are leaving the building now, and we're actually seeing funds get shut down because I think it's a new era for entrepreneurship, but you have to be willing to learn, right? You got to build new skills, and it's not about using AI, it's not about any of that. It's all these other skills. Um, it's kind of funny, in my household, I am the math nerd and my wife is the word nerd. And so the running joke is she handles the household finances, which I'm in the finance business, and I write books. Right. So it's like this running joke, like, hey, what are we doing here? And I think that's what it takes, right? It takes this idea of like, I'm gonna go outside of my frame of reference and what I
Mhm.
know and get good at things. And so I think that's where the book really stemmed from, was giving people a roadmap to thrive versus living in this construct of fear. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
fear is just so driven by unknowns, right? IBM coined the term fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's what AI, that's the state of mind people are in with AI. And I just wanted to build something that says, here's what the next steps are. My book before that, What You Know About Startups Is Wrong, was my experience with founders when I was at Georgia Tech and investing in startups, and my own experiences that people were just like, there was a lot of FUD. There was a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt with founders. And I thought if I could give them frameworks and share my own stories and my own failures, that somehow, um, they'd feel better, right? Like they'll just feel better. They'll read my book and feel better, right? That's all. That's my only goal. Um, it's I think we're talking about this morning. My publisher's just, every 3 hours I get book sales numbers, and I don't respond to him, and he kind of gets mad, and I'm like, I'm not that vested in how many books I sell. It's just not that's not why I do it, right?
Mhm.
Now he's highly vested in how many books I sell. I am not.
Different
Um,
motivation.
I just want to. if I can help a few people, that's cool, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Always wanted to be a doctor, huh?
So my mom would have loved that.
Well, if somehow you had just joined us and you haven't heard the first part of this conversation, this is KP Ready Unpacked. My name is Jeff Eccles. I'm joined by KP Ready, and every week we sit down and we unpack one of KP's LinkedIn posts. Again, if you're not following him, go to LinkedIn, type in KP REDDY, KP Ready, and follow him there. Couple posts a day, really insightful, really inspiring, really challenging sometimes posts. And today, the post that we're unpacking as we're recording this, he posted about a week ago, which means he probably posted it on about April 27th or 8th or so, I suppose. It's part of his Sunday Scaries series, and it reads, "You will always be a founder of your own startup. You may not always be the CEO. That is up to you." And so the article goes on to talk about how not all founders grow into CEOs. And KP and I have been unpacking that for the last several minutes here. Um, KP, when we record this next week, you'll be in Abu Dhabi.
Yep.
So, you get out your crystal ball. What do you think we're going to be talking about next week? Or maybe what are you looking forward to as you head to Abu Dhabi?
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of what's on my mind right now um, is, I would say, a little bit of macro trends about what's going on right now. I think the job market is falsely, like, people think it's really good. I don't think it's as good as people think, and I'm getting good signals around, a lot of signals around um, the jobs market kind of getting soft, especially around places like management consulting, like consulting companies. Which, by the way, in my book, I think I have a chapter that's like the death of management consulting. you know, and so I think there's a lot of things happening. I'm actually going to Abu Dhabi to speak at NYU. NYU has a big campus there, so I'm doing a fireside chat there with Sam Chandon, with Dr. Sam Chandon, to talk about AI. You know, what's happening in the Middle East right now is there's a lot of capital allocation happening, both in UAE and in Saudi Arabia. In Saudi, there's just so much going on. And I think they're very focused on AI. They're just extremely focused on AI, kind of for good reason, you know. And I think my chat with Sam is going to be kind of around the book topic and that sort of thing. But I'm sure I'll have plenty of things to have, plenty of plain time to write about things. But I do think I really do believe this. We are probably in one of the most interesting times in my lifetime. I think only before this, the dot com was a very interesting time because we were building stuff and doing things that people, even we didn't understand the gravity
Mhm.
of what we're building. We're just building websites. We're just setting up internet networks. We're just running fiber. Like, you know, we had an idea, right? We had an
Mhm.
idea. But I think even in our biggest ideas, what happened with the internet and internet infrastructure is beyond what any of us imagined.
Mhm.
You know, my son was like, "Dad, what's some good books to read about like the future of technology?" I'm like, "It's called science fiction. I go read science fiction. They're much better at it than us engineering types,
Mhm.
um, because we still live with boundary conditions when we think about the future." And so I think not since the dot com have I really seen what's going on, right? What's happening right now is just very, very different. And it feels like the dot com days. What I would tell you is everything since the internet days has really been derivative work,
Mhm.
right? An app is just a browser, Wi-Fi is just an internet connection. Like, it's really just derivative work and form factors and functionality. Not a lot new.
Right.
Right? Not a lot new. Transformative for sure. I'm not diminishing, what everyone has done, but we just kind of moved, the digital library from the desktop to our phone, and I think we can't even imagine what's happening with AI. And I
Mhm.
think when I have to wake up every day with not enough sleep and still be energized. There's just so much happening right now, and it's a lot to keep up with. So I feel like many times, like what we do on the pod and what my writing, it's like so much of service because not everybody gets to do what we do, right? Other people have to go like, this is like our day job. I get to talk to 50 startups a week. I get to go around and talk to executives, and put and put all that content and information together in some cogent format and deliver it via voice, video, words, carrier pigeon, whatever. And by the way, I do think I want to start doing a quarterly printed report. And people are like, "You're insane! Like what?" I'm like, I think people still love printed things. Mm-hmm. Like it's gone full circle. Just like I listen to vinyl. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's this like like people are like, oh no, I love holding on to something. Yep. On the venture side, we do our annual report in a printed version. And Matt and Nick thought I was insane. Like, what are you talking about? Print something. I'm like, no, let's print something and we're going to mail it. And I'm going to put a handwritten note in it. And they're like, oh my God, you're such a boomer. And we did it the first year, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for Matt. But the feedback we got was just, there was like, oh my God, it's amazing. Like I keep it in my briefcase. I keep it on my kitchen table, because it's just so much to digest. You guys put a great content together. I just walk around with it. And it's fascinating. I think like, you got to connect to people kind of where they're at. And, so yeah, maybe we start doing printed stuff, do mailers.
We may do that. And just to be clear, you're not a boomer.
I am not a boomer.
not that there's anything wrong with that, but being a little bit older than KP, I'm adamant about the fact that he's not a boomer. So.
That would imply that you're a boomer.
Yeah, we got a couple months on you there, but yeah, maybe printed. It is super interesting how things come full circle, right? The nostalgia piece of it, the tactile things that we feel like we're missing.
Well, the reason I even bring it up is the ability to produce printed right now. It's not hard. Like we could take this entire segment, push it through the AI stuff that we use, have it write it, have it Canva AI autographic design it, and push print to Amazon to a preloaded database and just gets shipped. I mean, that's wild. We're in wild times. Jeff, we just lost you.
And I think it is wild. And I think for those out there, like you said earlier, there is a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear mongering around it. And we probably take a lot for granted because we see things, and you more than I, but we see things that, a lot of the general public won't see for a while. And I think that's another great argument for folks to pick up your book, the latest book on the creating the intangible enterprise. Founders definitely pick up what you know about startups is wrong, and probably give it to your significant other or your family members. But also in terms of following you on LinkedIn and getting involved in all of the content that we produce and the Catalyst network that we have, because you can see what's happening. You can understand the value of it. And maybe you can start to imagine where things are really headed, and see that it's maybe not quite as dark as you might imagine it to be.
I don't know.
All right. Well, I think that's a great place for us to wrap it up. Again, when KP and I get together again next week, Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern is where we record these live. By the way, you can watch this over in the Catalyst Network. You can join us for the live recording of this. It's sort of like when I was a kid, you'd go up in Chicago, you'd go up in the the Sears Tower. And yes, it is still called the Sears Tower. I don't care what you say. There's a there's a radio station up there, and you can watch through the glass, as they recorded. That's sort of what we're doing here without quite as much height. Um, or structural sway for that matter. Um, but you can join us in the Catalyst Network as we record this live. Next week, KP will be in Abu Dhabi as we do this, and you'll just have to wait and see. Check this out wherever you're listening to this now. Like it, share it, do all those things. It helps us to spread the message out to a broader audience, and hopefully we can help them thrive in an AI-driven world. So, KP, thanks as always for joining me. Great conversation. Looking forward to the next one.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.